Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Old Time Rock and Roll. I'm your host, David Tear, where I've been featuring my personal top 3,000 songs of the rock era from 1954 to 1999. Today, I'm going to do something a little bit different. You'll see what it is in a couple minutes. But first, I'll tell you what song number 2907 is on my list. It's Everybody's Talkin' by Nilsson. This was Harry Nilsson's first hit song in 1969. It went to number six, I believe, in the USA. And it was also featured in a very popular movie called Midnight Cowboy. Oh, here's a picture of Harry Nilsson. Kind of an ugly guy, I think. I had another song of his just a few weeks ago. I don't know if you remember. Song number 2926 was Coconut. That was another big hit of his. It came out in 1972. I liked Coconut better than Everybody's Talking. Even though this one came in a little bit higher. I think I ranked this one a little bit higher because I think it's a little bit more well known. It was it was featured in the movie Midnight Cowboy. Here's the poster for the movie Midnight Cowboy, and I'm really dismayed. This movie was got the Best Picture Academy Award for 1969. I think that and Silence of the Lambs were probably the two worst picks I know of for Best Picture. And yeah, I don't know if you guys here's the special feature I want to do today. I am kind of a movie buff. I don't know if you guys realize this. In addition to being a rock and roll buff, I'm also a kind of a classic movie buff. It turns out I've actually watched 56 Best Picture movies. And what I thought I'd do today, since I've been ranking my personal top 3,000 songs of all time, I thought I'd go through the awards for Best Picture, and I'm going to give you my picks, what I think. Of all the 56 years in which I've seen the Best Picture that Hollywood picked for the Academy Award, I'm going to tell you the ones that I think should have won that year. It turns out I think about one third of them I do like the choice that Hollywood made. And let me just explain the color coding here. So the ones in red, I don't know if you guys can see all these movies on my list. I hope you can. But the movies I in red are ones where I agreed with Hollywood's pick for Best Picture. I think there's 17 out of 56 that agree. And then the ones in yellow are ones where I think I picked one that was one of the nominees, either the top five or top 10 that Hollywood picked. Um, and the ones I put um, Hollywood in yellow are those are ones that I think are probably around the top five or top 10 of that year, but not my favorite. The ones in green, the ones I picked that are in green are ones that Hollywood did not nominate for Best Picture, but I thought they were probably the best picture, at least the best picture I've seen from those years. And then similarly, the ones that I put, that were Best Picture that I put in green, those are ones that I really was not crazy about, and I think Hollywood made a mistake picking those. So anyway, let me just go through my list. I think you guys will be interested in this. So like I said, I've watched 56 out of I think 97. I think there've been 97 Academy Awards since they started in 1928. I've watched 56 out of 97, so more than half. I've watched more than half of the Best Picture movies, and I was born in 1962, so the movies at the beginning of this list, I have these listed chronologically. And this slide is the early ones. I have them on two different slides here. This is from 1938 to 1980. So the ones at the top of my list, these are before I was born, but there's a lot of classics on here. So the first Best Picture movie I ever saw, the earliest one was You Can't Take It With You. That was an excellent Frank Capra film. I love Frank Capra, by the way. He's one of my favorite directors of all time. I'd say he and Stanley Kubrick are probably my two favorite directors of all time. Stanley Kubrick mostly because of his sci-fi movies like 2001. He was also just an amazing cinematographer. Frank Capra because I just like his movies. I mean, his movies are always about the little guy getting ahead. I mean, most of his movies from the Depression. The only one of his movies I've seen I wasn't really crazy about was It Happened One Night. I think that one's overrated. Uh, but You Can't Take It With You. I just watched that one last night. That's an excellent movie. I've only seen it a couple times, but it's basically, it's about this struggling, big extended family during the depression, just trying to make a living doing what they wanted, and meanwhile, this big company's trying to buy them out. They're trying to buy 12 houses on a block so they can build a big factory. I mean, these movies are kind of like that. They're always about, rich people, rich and powerful people trying to get their way. And every movie like that, they don't succeed. The little guy succeeds. And I wish life was still like that. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like it's like that anymore. Seems like things are the other way around now. But that's what I love about Frank Capra. And so you can't take it with you. I think it's a really excellent movie. I do highly recommend that one. And then for Not 39, the next year, the one that was picked was Gone with the Wind. And this was one of the first movies, one of the first big movies that was shot in color and Technicolor, I think, no less. And it was Victor Fleming who directed it, and he actually directed two color films in 1939. Most people consider Gone with the Wind one of the best movies ever made. As a matter of fact, adjusted for inflation, Gone with the Wind is the number one box office movie of all time. Adjusted for inflation, I looked this up a couple of years ago. It was like 2 years ago. The gross earnings of Gone with the Wind, I believe, in 2022 were like $1.3 billion. Hard to believe. I mean, I think it's an overrated movie. It's a good movie, and that's why I have it in yellow. But it's really not one of my favorites. I think it's overrated. I was never that crazy about the story. I mean, I don't know, but the movie I think should have been Best Picture for 1939 was actually it was the other Victor Fleming movie and the other Technicolor movie from 1939, which I think most people think is one of the greatest movies of all time, The Wizard of Oz. I love The Wizard of Oz. I've probably seen it about 20 times, mostly on TV, because ever since I was a kid, they showed it every year on TV. Amazing movie. Just amazing. Not only was it made in color, one of the first movies made in color, but the special effects were just amazing. I mean, the Wicked Witch and all the magic and all the, just pretty amazing that Hollywood could do all that in 1939, I think. And a pretty amazing story, too. And, it's a fairy tale, but it had a very good moral lesson at the end. If you're looking for paradise, you don't have to look any farther than your own backyard. I mean, that's a pretty powerful message. There's no place like home. And so I just love that movie. And then 19 I didn't see any other movies till 1943 on this list. Casablanca. I mean, I don't think anybody can argue that Casablanca is one of the best movies of all time. If you didn't like Casablanca, there's something wrong with you. That's what I think. I mean, Casablanca is just such an amazing movie on so many levels. I mean, it was shot during World War II when all the stuff in the movie was really going on. And of course, Humphrey Bogart. I mean, he was one of the greatest actors of all time, and he did his best acting job in Casablanca. Who wouldn't want to be Humphrey Bogart from Casablanca? I mean, just his chemistry with Ingrid Bergman. Words can't even you can't even put it into words. I mean, that's no doubt one of the best movies of all time. Not just for the romance, but for the whole story, and and the ending. I mean, even though he has this affair with Ilsa and she turns out to be married to a spy, he does the right thing at the end of the movie. He lets them go to America. He realizes that like he says, the problems of three people don't amount to one hill of beans in this crazy world, and that's very, very true. So just a very, very powerful movie. And then the 1946, the one that but one for that year was The Best Years of Our Lives. I saw that movie. It was okay. Maybe I didn't completely get it. I don't know. A lot of people seem to love that movie. I didn't think it was that great. The one I picked for 1946 is It's a Wonderful Life. And as a matter of fact, I think this may be my favorite movie of all time right now. For most of my life, it was 2001: A Space Odyssey, but I'd say in the last 5 years or so, this one has made the top of my list. I mean, It's a Wonderful Life. That is Capra's masterpiece, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, just what's such amazing message of that movie? He was so down and out because he thought his life was a failure. just because he wasn't able to travel, and because at the end of the movie, he loses $8,000. He's ready to kill himself. And then his guardian angel shows him what the world would look like if he'd never been born. I mean, I think we all need to be shown something like that. He was such a wonderful person his whole life. He helped everybody he knew. The world would have been, just such a worse place if it weren't for him. And he needed an angel to show him that in order to appreciate how valuable he was, not just to himself, but to everybody he ever cared about. I mean, that just has one of the most powerful messages of any movie I've ever seen in my life. I can't imagine a better movie than that, really. So that one I think should have won. And I think I just want to say a couple things before I continue. The Wizard of Oz and It's a Wonderful Life, those are both box office failures when they were released. But I think they were two of the greatest movies ever made. Just because a movie is popular when it comes out doesn't necessarily mean it's a great movie. And just because a movie didn't make it when it came out doesn't mean it was a bad movie. I mean, you know, so anyway, then 1950, All About Eve. I remember I only saw this movie once. It was okay. I think that's the only movie I've ever seen from 1950, believe it or not. But it wasn't too bad. It's about this very, very vain woman played by Betty Davis. I guess she's supposed to be Eve in this movie. She's also pretty evil. I'll have to watch that one again. I don't even remember the whole story, but I just remember she's very evil and very manipulative, and she gets her way, basically. That was good. What's next? 51. They picked American and in Paris. I didn't think that one was that great. I mean, yeah, Gene Kelly, he was a great dancer and great singer, but there wasn't that much of a story to it. I mean, it wasn't anywhere nearly as good as the movie came up with the following year, Singing in the Rain. That was his masterpiece. And that one did not win for 1952, I don't think. I think they picked the greatest show on earth. I left 1952 out because I don't think I never saw the greatest show on earth. I've seen previews of it. I mean, it looks okay. It's about a traveling circus, and I guess there's some wild animals, some lions escaped from one of the box cars. It looked pretty spectacular from the preview. Cecil B. DeMille, he was another really great director. He did the Ten Commandments, which I do really like. But I never saw The Greatest Show on Earth. But I can't imagine it would be as good as Singing in the Rain. So I'm kind of surprised they didn't pick Singing in the Rain for 52. But they did pick American in Paris for 51, which I thought was okay. Not so great. The one I thought was the best movie I've ever seen from 1952 was the day the or 51 was the day the Earth stood still. I love this movie. I mean, this is a classic sci-fi film if there ever was one. And I don't want to give it away, but I love the message at the end of the movie. This is a message that I wish people would remember. It's a good message for why we should strive for world peace. And I think it's a good explanation for the Fermi paradox. Actually, I think this is the reason why we haven't been visited by any extraterrestrials yet. They just don't want to visit us yet. So we get our act together. So we stop fighting each other. Till we've matured enough. Maybe gotten past the great filter. So just think about that a little bit. Like I said, I'm not going to give this movie away. I do highly recommend it, though. 1953, they picked From Here to Eternity. I saw this movie. I wasn't that crazy about, but I'm not very crazy about World War II movies in general. I mean, I thought it was overrated. There's supposed to be this really steamy romance scene where I don't even remember the names of the actor and the actress, but there's a scene where they're making out on the beach. It's supposed to be a very passionate romance scene. I remember watching this. I don't think it was that great. They kind of get in a fight after they're making love. I didn't get that. Uh, and I've seen a lot better lovemaking in a lot of other movies besides From Here to Eternity. I mean, come on. Didn't compare with a scene in Ghost. But, what was the movie I picked for 53? I picked Roman Holiday. This is a really excellent movie. I think this is the first big movie for Audrey Hepburn. I love Audrey Hepburn. Audrey Hepburn has got to be one of my favorite actresses of all time. Not only was she gorgeous, but she was an excellent actress too. I mean, God, she was unbelievable. She was breathtaking. And I thought she and Gregory Peck both did a really amazing job in this movie. It's not even my favorite movie of hers, but I think it was an excellent movie, and I think it should have been Best Picture for 1953. 55, Marty won Best Picture. He's okay. It's a cute story. It's a cute story about, this kind of nobody who falls in love. And, it's pretty nice to see how enthralled he was after, he wins the love of his life. So it was nice in that way. But I didn't think it was the best picture of the year. God, Guys and Dolls. I mean, that's my pick for 1955. That's one of my favorite movies of all time. I mean, at its height, MGM, when they were making their musicals, especially in the 50s, they just did amazing musicals. And I think Guys and Dolls has got to be one of the best musicals I've ever seen in my life. Amazing music, amazing acting, amazing story. I mean, yeah, it is about a bunch of kind of no good gamblers in New York City, but it's just a very entertaining movie, and it has a really wonderful happy ending at the end. And it has a lot of valuable lessons about life. I mean, you know, uh, when Nicely Nicely decides to turn around, when he sings Sit Down, You're Rocking the Boat. Amazing song, an amazing message about how he finally learns what really matters in life. So that movie I love. And um, 1956. This one I do agree with. Around the World in 80 Days. Amazing movie, and very very true to Jules Verne's short story or novel that he wrote back in 1872. Jules Verne is one of my favorite sci-fi authors of all time. He wrote some amazing sci-fi back in the 19th century, and I don't know if you consider Around the World in 80 Days to be a sci-fi story. I kind of do, because he wrote it in 1872, and he imagined that, pretty soon we'd be able to travel around the world in 80 days. We finally did about 25 years later. I don't remember the woman's name, but there was a woman in 1997, I believe, who traveled around the world in 72 days. So it took 25 years for what his prediction to come true. But it did come true. Now we can go around the world in 90 minutes on a satellite. We can't in America anymore because we can't send anybody in space unless it's from a billionaire. I don't want to get into that, but so I love that movie. And actually, there was a remake of Around the World in 80 Days. I like that one too, although the remake isn't anywhere nearly as good. The remake's a comedy with Jackie Chan. It's a funny movie, but you can't take it seriously, and it's not true at all to Jules Verne. But it's funny for what it is, I think. They also make fun of Lord Kelvin in that movie. I think they do a great job with Lord Kelvin. He's the bad guy in the movie. And then what? 1957, The Bridge Over the River Kwai, another World War II movie I wasn't really that crazy about. I guess I'm not crazy about World War II movies because, like, my parents always loved them. I mean, my parents lived through World War II. I guess they were kids during World War II, but I never liked World War II movies because, like, when I was growing up, my parents were always watching all these World War II movies and just getting so caught up in them. I never lived through a world war. I'm glad I didn't. I never really experienced any wars firsthand, and maybe that's one way I've been lucky in my whole life. I mean, I think we have had wars. We've had some pretty bad ones during my lifetime. Probably the worst was Vietnam. Well, also the whole war on terrorism was pretty bad too. But at least I didn't have to fight in those wars. I mean, I'm glad we won World War II. I guess you kind of had to live through it to really appreciate, how we saved the world and how we defeated the Axis powers, especially the Nazis, especially Hitler. But I just wasn't part of that generation. So I'm not so enthralled with World War II movies. Another thing a lot of people don't realize about World War II, a big reason we won it was because of Alan Turing. I'll get to that later, but we didn't even know about that until the 90s. So I think actually I think Alan Turing was probably the reason we for D-Day, why we were able to invade Normandy. I'm sure that we had the intelligence due to Alan Turing breaking the Enigma code. We knew where to go. So, but for like 50 years, people didn't even know that he was responsible for that. So, anyway, that's all I want to say about that. But no, I wasn't crazy about the bridge over the river Kwai. But 12 Angry Men. I mean, That's an amazing movie from 1957. Just an amazing movie. It's about justice. It's about our legal system and why the jury's so important and why one person with a good conscience can make all the difference in the world. You have to see that movie. I don't want to give any more away than that, what I've already said, but amazing movie. I think that one should win Best Picture. 1959, Ben-Hur won Best Picture. Most people think that's one of the greatest movies ever made. I've watched it a few times. It's pretty good. I mean, there's good things about it. I think that was another one directed by Cecil B. DeMille, if I'm not mistaken. There's that great chariot race scene, which is pretty amazing. I heard, I've only watched it on TV. I've heard if you watch it in a movie theater, there's no comparison because on a wide screen you get to see a lot more of the chariot race than you can on TV where they cut parts of it out. So maybe I didn't see all the chariots, but I'm not that crazy about Ben-Hur. I mean, it's mostly about, the death of Jesus. They show Jesus' crucifixion. Yeah, I'm not Christian, so maybe I'm not as moved by that as most people were when they saw the movie. I've seen better movies about ancient Rome. I think Spartacus is a much better movie than Ben-Hur. Um, I don't think Spartacus even got a nomination for Best Picture, but I liked it better. That was another one directed by one of my favorite directors, Stanley Kubrick. And I think it's probably more true. I think it's probably more accurate about what the Roman Empire was really like than Ben-Hur. They show about 6,000 crucifixions along the Appian Way. One thing most Christians don't realize: Jesus wasn't the only person that got crucified. It was their regular form of execution in ancient Rome. 6,000 people on crosses all along the Appian Way. Don't forget. So anyway, that's enough of that. But no, the picture I thought should have won Best Picture of 1959, hands down, is North by Northwest. That is my favorite Alfred Hitchcock movie. And I don't think any Alfred Hitchcock movie even won Best Picture, believe it or not. And I think I didn't even mention him as a director. I should have put him up there with Stanley Kubrick and Frank Capra. I mean, yeah, he has to be one of my favorite directors of all time. I mean, Master of Suspense. He did some amazing movies, and he did amazing cinematography in all his movies. I mean, his movies are one of a kind, and I think North by Northwest was the best of his movies. I even think it kind of set the stage for James Bond in a lot of ways. But I'm not going to give the movie away. I mean, I think you guys should watch that one if you haven't seen it already. Amazing movie. Um, 1960, The Apartment. I agree with that pick. The Apartment was a really amazing movie. That one was directed by Billy Wilder. I think it was probably his best. Either that or maybe Some Like It Hot. Um, you know, Amazing movie. I don't want to give it away. It's kind of a black comedy. I don't know if it's a black comedy, but it's a comedy with a lot of drama, which is what a lot of his movies are. And I don't want to give away the story. You just have to see it. But I think it's an excellent movie. West Side Story, 1961. Now we're talking. I mean, West Side Story's got to be one of my favorite movies of all time. Amazing movie. I mean, amazing music, amazing choreography and cinematography. I can't think of a single thing about West Side Story that I don't like. Just amazing. They made a remake of it recently. I think Steven Spielberg directed a remake a couple years ago. It's good. I think it was a little bit overrated. It was good, but I don't think it was as good as the original. One thing I love about the original, the music's amazing. It was written by Leonard Bernstein, who I think wrote the best music of any musicals ever made, even better than Rodgers and Hammerstein, who I'm getting to. But no, West Side Story is an amazing movie. And 1962, Lawrence of Arabia. Another excellent choice. I think I've only seen this once or twice. I must have saw it about 20 years ago. Very long movie, almost 4 hours long. Probably the longest one on my list. But, um, amazing movie. It's a true story, too. I'll have to watch it again. But this guy, Lawrence of Arabia, if I'm not mistaken, he was an Arabian who lived about 100 years ago, and he did some amazing stuff in this movie. I don't even remember what he did. I don't even really remember the story, but it's a true story about a really amazing Arab who I think he kind of like united some community. I have to watch the movie again because I don't remember the story, but I thought that was a really excellent pick. 1963, Tom Jones. I don't know why they picked this one. I don't think it's that great a movie. I watched it. I watched it once. It's about some playboy in the 18th century, some French playboy. He has sex with all these women. I don't think it was a very good movie. I mean, that was kind of the whole point of the movie. He gets in all these shenanigans, and I think they even try to hang him near the end of the movie, but he gets out of that. But he kind of gets away with a beautiful woman every adventure he has. And I just didn't think it was that great. The movie I liked better for 1963, maybe there weren't that many really great movies in 1963, but the one I picked for Best Picture, maybe you guys are going to laugh when I tell you, Bye Bye Birdie. I love Bye Bye Birdie. I don't know why. I've probably seen it about 20 times. And yeah, it's kind of a preteen movie for like preteen girls mostly. But if you take it for what it is, if you don't take it seriously, it was meant to be a spoof. I mean, it's basically an Elvis spoof. Conrad Birdie, he's supposed to be Elvis, but he's kind of a joke. And if you can just take it for what it is, just kind of laugh with it, then I think it's a really good movie. And who could resist Anne Margaret? At least what man in the world could resist Anne Margaret? I mean, she was gorgeous. A lot of people called her the female Elvis. Not only was she gorgeous, she was a pretty great singer too. And she's had a very, very long and successful career. She's one of my favorite actresses of all time. Not only is she gorgeous, but I think she's also a really excellent actress. And I think she was in Bye Bye Birdie as well. And she was just maybe, if she's supposed to be 16 in the movie, she's probably like 19 or 20 when she made it. But she did an amazing job in that movie. And it wasn't just her, it was a really good musical. There was a lot of really great songs in that movie, like Put On a Happy Face by Dick Van Dyke and Kids Today by Paul Lynde. Just to name a few, just great movie. And 1964, they did pick a really good one for that year, My Fair Lady. I mean, everything, I love everything about My Fair Lady, except I'm not crazy about the story. I really don't like this story. I mean, I think the story is very, very outdated for one thing, and it's about an egomaniac. Henry Higgins. He's a horrible egomaniac. He has a horrible ego. He thinks he can reform this flower girl, turn her into pass her off as a princess, which he does by teaching her to speak proper English. And then he has total disregard for her feelings, doesn't even really treat her like a human being. And finally, after all that, he finally falls in love with her at the end of the movie. And then she's stupid enough to go back to him. She should have gone to Freddie, who really did love her. I just don't like the story. And I think it's outdated and I think it's very sexist. And so that's why I didn't pick My Fair Lady as Best Picture. But the one I like better for 1964, you guys might laugh at this one too. Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. I mean, it's a black comedy. It's probably about the blackest comedy you can imagine. It's a comedy about World War III, if you can imagine that. And it's kind of funny because there's been a lot of movies about World War III. Most of them are very serious. They're all about how horrible it would be if we had World War III, and nobody questions that. World War III would basically be the end of the world, and nobody wants that, obviously. But Stanley Kubrick. There's another one directed by Stanley Kubrick, and it starred Peter Sellers. I think this is one of the best movies I've seen with Peter Sellers. He plays like three roles. He usually plays multiple roles in his movies. So he was both the president. He was also Doctor Strangelove, this madman. And there were a couple of madmen in the movie. There was also, I don't remember his name. There was a horribly mad general who thought the Russians were trying to poison us by fluoridating our water, and that's why he decides to aim 30 nuclear missiles at the Soviet Union. So that's what the whole movie's about. I don't want to give away the whole story, but basically it's all about how the whole government, the United States government is trying to prevent World War III, but they don't quite succeed. And it is a comedy, believe it or not. And you kind of have to laugh at it. I mean, I'm glad nothing like that ever happened. Um, but I do like that movie, and I think it probably should have been Best Picture for 64. 65. I don't think anybody could question that The Sound of Music was probably the best movie of 1965. I love this movie. I've probably seen it about 20 times. One of my favorite movies of all time. Got to be my favorite musical of all time. And who couldn't love Julie Andrews at the beginning of the movie singing The Sound of Music in the middle of the Swiss Alps there. I mean, that has got to be one of the best scenes from any movie ever made. And not just that, the whole movie. I mean, the whole movie, all the music is really, really excellent. And it's a true story. It's based on a true story, anyway. It's about the singing family, the Von Trapps from Austria, and how they are able to escape from the Nazis, right before World War II. And they did. And they ended up in Vermont. And I think I don't know if the kids are still alive. I think some of them are, but I think the family still lives there. So kudos to the Von Trapps, and kudos to the people who made The Sound of Music, one of my favorite movies. And really excellent Roger Hammerstein score. Like I said, I prefer Leonard Bernstein, but Rogers and Hammerstein did some pretty good ones too. Uh, and then 66, I don't think I saw the Best Picture 66, but 67, they picked In the Heat of the Night. I don't know why they picked that one. I wasn't that crazy about it. I've only seen it maybe once or twice. All I remember is about some cop in the South. I think there's a lot of racism involved. I don't remember the story exactly, but um, I didn't think it was that great. The movie I really did love from '67. I don't know why this was nominated for Best Picture, didn't win. I think it should have. The Graduate. Graduate's got to be one of my favorite movies of all time. And not only did it have an amazing soundtrack uh, of great songs by Simon and Garfunkel, but the story was an amazing story. And this is probably one of my favorite probably is my favorite movie with Dustin Hoffman. I think it was his first. Amazing story. I'm not going to give it away. I mean, I think most of you've probably seen it and know what it's about, but I just love this movie. And 68, 69, they didn't make very good picks. 68, they picked Oliver. Oliver, it was okay. Yeah, it was a musical, but not a very good one. I read Oliver Twist. I'm not crazy about Charles Dickens. I can't say there's any novels I've ever read by Charles Dickens that I've really enjoyed. Probably the one I liked the most was A Christmas Carol, believe it or not, even though I'm Jewish. No, I hate Dickens. I never enjoyed reading anything by Dickens. I don't know how he got to be so famous. I mean, Oliver, actually, I think Oliver Twist is probably my second favorite of his books, but I didn't really like it. I mean, it's about an orphan kid, yeah, and there's a lot of drama in it. It's about an orphan from England who lives in the early 19th century when things are really shitty, and he gets adopted by a family of thieves led by the Artful Dodger. My favorite thing about the movie Oliver is the song "Consider Yourself." It's a great song. That's my favorite part of the movie when the Artful Dodger sings "Consider Yourself" to Oliver, when he basically invites him into his family of thieves. But I think it was a great movie. 2001: A Space Odyssey. I mean, for most of my life, this has been my favorite movie of all time, hands down. I remember I first saw it, I think, in the mid 70s. I couldn't believe the cinematography in this movie. And, the sad thing for me, I've always loved sci fi. I've always thought, at least when I was a kid, and maybe when I was a teenager, I always imagined the future would be a lot better. I mean, that's what they used to tell everybody, especially in the early to mid 60s. I mean, sci fi used to be very, very optimistic in the 50s and 60s. Everybody imagined the future was going to be a lot better. Now it's the opposite. Now most sci-fi movies about the future, they think there's going to be a doomsday, or they think we're going to be living in some kind of dystopia. I think, I can kind of see that because I think we're approaching one right now, you know. But what Gandhi said about that. He said we must be the change we wish to see in the world. If we want to live in a better world, we have to make it better ourselves. And I don't think we're doing that. That's why the world's going to hell, because we're letting a lot of very powerful, bad people run things, and they're running it to the ground. I don't want to get into that too much. We have to make the change that we need to see. And unfortunately, we didn't make the changes we should have made in order to make 2001 come true. People were telling people in the late 60s that all this stuff was going to come true by the year 2001. We'd have orbiting space stations, we'd have missions to Jupiter, people would be living in space. Everything was about space back in the 60s. I mean, it kind of makes sense because we had the first space missions then, and it culminated with landing on the moon in 1969. But ever since the 70s, people lost interest in outer space. Now nobody wants to go there anymore. And the only way Americans can go into space now is if they get a ticket from a billionaire. Our government, NASA's not even sending Americans into space anymore. Europe is, I guess, with what is the programs called? I used to know the name of the European ESA, European Space Agency. I guess you can, if you can go to Europe, maybe they'll send you into space. But people can't go to space anymore, which I think is really, really, really sad. And I used to think when I was in the 70s, I loved this guy Gerard O'Neill. He imagined that we were going to have cities in space in the 21st century. That hasn't happened. And I thought it would happen, and I imagined myself being one of the first people living on one of these space colonies. I imagine I'd be living on a space colony by now. I'm not, obviously. I'm living in Las Vegas. I'm living in a ghetto in Las Vegas. I mean, I think the good thing that's happened during my lifetime is computers. I love computers. I always have. And we've come so far with computers. That's how we've progressed. That's how we've moved into the future with computers. I love computers. A lot of people are really scared of them, but I love them. And I think they're still the future. And they're still kind of in their infancy. We haven't even seen the end of computers. We're going to have quantum computers pretty soon. I think pretty soon we're going to have conscious computers. Computers that can be your friend or maybe your enemy. But anyway, that's enough about 2001. 69. I just watched this movie tonight, Midnight Cowboy. I think this was the worst pick. I think either this or Silence of the Lambs were. I think those two movies were the two worst picks by Hollywood for Best Picture. I watched Midnight. I've seen it twice. I watched it maybe 20, 30 years ago, and then I watched it again tonight. I thought maybe I'd see it a little bit different light tonight. I watched it tonight. Terrible movie. I mean, yeah, a lot of drama. I mean, I guess the best thing you could say about Midnight Cowboy is maybe you could say it's realistic. I'm sure there's a lot of people who are this down and out as Dustin Hoffman and whoever the guy was who played the cowboy, the Midnight Cowboy. They had miserable lives, and I'm not going to go into the plot, but it's these two really, really miserable people in New York, and Dustin Hoffman even dies at the end. I thought it was really, really hard to watch. And if you want to experience real life like that, then just live it. But I don't want to live that kind of life, and I don't want to watch a movie about that kind of life. And it even got an X rating when it came out. I mean, I don't know why Hollywood would pick an X-rated movie for Best Picture of the year. You know, they were gigolos basically. They decided to make a living as male prostitutes in New York City. And there's even a homosexual scene where this kid, gives oral sex to Dustin Hoffman in a movie theater. Pretty horrible. Or no, I was the other guy, the Midnight Cowboy. But I mean, why would they pick a movie like that for Best Picture? It's a shame on Hollywood for picking that movie. But then let's go on. Patton, 1970. That was a good movie. It's kind of funny. I just said how I don't really like World War II movies. I do like Patton has got to be my favorite World War II movie, and the reason I like it because it's not just like "Yay America, Yay USA, we saved the world." It's about how crazy Patton was. He was a megalomaniac. He thought he was a reincarnation of a Carthaginian general, and he treated his troops like shit. And he even wanted to continue fighting the Soviet Union after we defeated the Axis powers. The guy was nuts. You know, and I think the movie made that clear. Not all the generals, not all the Americans were good during World War II. Patton was out of his mind. I mean, for what it's worth, he did become a four-star general. He did help us win the war, but other than that, he was a sick man. And they made that very clear in that movie. So that's why I liked it. Um, 1971, the French. I don't really like what happened in the movies in the 70s. I mean, I like all the old. One thing I really like about older movies from the like 50s and 60s, there were a lot of great musicals. They had a more positive message back then. But then the 70s, people got very disillusioned. I mean, we started seeing much more violent movies, much more kind of depressing movies, and I guess the first kind of violent movie that was really popular, one of the first was The French Connection. I saw that movie. I wasn't that crazy about it. Kind of a mob movie about a French mob. I don't even remember the story that much. I don't think it was that great a movie. The movie I love, hands down, I think this one should have won Best Picture for 1971. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Still one of my favorite movies of all time. I think it was the 70s version of The Wizard of Oz. I mean, the scene where they go in the chocolate room, to me, that's as amazing as when Dorothy ends up in Munchkin Land. I think the chocolate room and the Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory is the closest thing I've seen in any movie to Munchkin Land and the Wizard of Oz. I saw this movie when it first came out. I was only 9 years old, and it was an amazing movie to me. And I could relate to it because I was just 9, and the kids in the movie were about my age. I was going to the candy store with my sister at the time. It was a little shocking to me because I almost thought the first half of the movie was real. I even believed the golden tickets was really going on. And then when they go in the chocolate factory, there's all this magic. I was wondering what the hell's going on now. But the main thing I love about this movie is a morality play. And I think the message of this movie is that in the long run, we all get what we deserve. I mean, Charlie, he was the good kid, and he proves how good he is by returning the everlasting gobstopper to Willy Wonka. Even though Willy Wonka acts like a madman, he's just so grateful to Willy Wonka for showing him the factory, and he can't do wrong, so he gives him back his everlasting Godstopper instead of giving it to who he thought was Slugworth, you know, because he didn't want to put Willy Wonka out of business. And it turned out the whole thing was just a test. Pretty horrible test, if you ask me. But oh, I love that movie. I mean, great dialogue in that movie too. Some great lines. I didn't even talk about lines in these movies. One of my favorite lines in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory when Charlie gives the everlasting gobstocker bear back to Willy Wonka. He says, "So shines a good deed in a weary world." Wonderful line, and just a wonderful movie altogether. And anyway, that's my pick for Best Picture of 1971. 72, The Godfather. Even though I'm not a big fan of violent movies, like I said, I wasn't that crazy about The French Connection. I think I'd make an exception for The Godfather. The Godfather was a pretty amazing movie. I think I do agree with Hollywood's choice for The Godfather being the best movie of 1972. Pretty amazing movie, even though it was very violent. Uh, so that one I won't argue with. 1973, The Sting, kind of continuation of violence streak. I wasn't crazy about The Sting, even though the musical score, the soundtrack is it's all songs by Scott Joplin, who was a really great early jazz musician in the 19th century, and I think Marvin Hamlish does a really good job with the score. My mom used to play the theme all the time on the piano. Do 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 do. I mean, everybody knows that song. The music's great, but I wasn't that crazy about the story. It's about these outlaws basically, and then there's a big sting at the end of the movie. They make all this money illegally, and I guess people liked that. I wasn't so crazy about it. No, the pick I have for 1973 is American Graffiti. I love this movie. And I guess I have a lot of personal reasons for loving it because, as you know, I'm a big fan of old time rock and roll. I mean, one of the best musical scores of any movie I've ever seen in my life. I mean, this movie, American Graffiti, this set the stage for the whole 50s revival in the 70s. And I think we kind of needed a little bit of a revival. The 70s is kind of a dismal decade. And I think, I mean, 50s was like, and it turned into a show called Happy Days, and it was Happy Days. And I think that's why the people loved the 50s so much in the 70s. They kind of wish they were living in it again. And, the music was great, the young people, it was the beginning of rock and roll. It was a kind of an innocent time. I mean, at that time, it was more just kind of teenagers having fun, on their own. But, I guess it was a lot more innocent in the 60s when it got all wrapped up with Vietnam and all this other drama. But no, I loved American Graffiti. And 1975, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. This movie I do really love. And it is a very sad story. It's a very serious drama about a mental institution run by a horrible nurse, Nurse Ratched. I'm sure there were a lot of horrible nurses like that at that time. I think the mental institutions were really bad in the mid 70s. And in the 60s, the story was supposed to take place in 1963, I think. Uh, but there was a lot of shit going on at that time. We weren't taking good care of mentally ill people at that time. Now I think we're doing even worse. The sad thing about what happened after One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, I think this movie made it very clear that the mental institutions were very bad. But what ended up happening was when Reagan became president, he shut them all down. So they all ended up in the street, which I think is even worse. So, we have to find a better way to deal with mentally ill people. And I think that was a point that Ken Kesey, the author, was trying to make. And I think he did it really dramatically with this movie. And I love Jack Nicholson in this movie. I think this is one of his best roles. And if I was in that hospital, I probably would have acted just like Jack Nicholson. They needed to have some fun. They needed to go deep sea fishing, and they needed to get laid. And I thought it was great how Jack Nicholson got one of the patients laid. The most uptight one, who was the most fucked up. I'm not going to give away the whole movie. There's a tragic ending, but I thought that was kind of the climax of the movie when that patient got laid, and kudos to Jack Nicholson for helping him do that. uh, but anyway, enough of that. Um, 1976, Rocky. Rocky was a very good movie. I think I agree with this pick for Best Picture of 1976. Sylvester Stallone. This was the role I think he was born to play. As we all know, boxers are pretty dumb. I guess they have to be after being beaten up in the head so much. But I think Sylvester Stallone. I hope you guys don't get mad at me for saying this, but I think he's really dumb in real life. He hasn't convinced me that he has much brains in any of the movies I've seen from him. And I think he was just born to play this role of Rocky. And he does a really good job with it. And it's a very good movie. And of course, that he was in 5 sequels. I don't think any of the sequels were as good as the original. I did sort of like Rocky 2 and Rocky 4. Rocky 4 was when he boxed against the Russian. The thing I didn't like about that one was he made a big speech at the end to the Russians about how they could change. They didn't have to be commies, basically. And I didn't like that for a couple reasons. First of all, I didn't completely agree with the message. Second of all, I don't believe anybody as dumb as Rocky could make a speech like that. But the first Rocky was pretty good. And 77, they picked Annie Hall. Annie Hall was a good movie. A lot of people think it was Woody Allen's best. I don't think so. I think it was one of his best, but I don't think it was his best. I think it was a little bit overrated. He didn't even show up. When, I think he won Best Actor. He didn't even show up for the Academy Awards when he won for this movie. I guess that kind of shows how neurotic he was in real life. But no, no, I mean, come on. Why didn't they pick Star Wars? I mean, God, Star Wars has got to be one of the best movies ever made. I mean, Star Wars was everywhere. Star Wars was the most popular movie ever made at the time it came out. I mean, I remember I was in a block I was in a line 3 blocks long to go see Star Wars when it came out. I had to wait an hour in line just to get into the movie theater because the line was so long. Everybody wanted to see Star Wars. Nobody's seen anything like this before. And I don't know why Hollywood didn't pick this as Best Picture. It was the most obvious choice for Best Picture. I think it was a nominee, but it did not win. Annie Hall beat it, and I don't know why. But I'm just gonna do one. This is gonna be a two-part series because I've been doing this for a long time already. So I'll do part two tomorrow. These are the early movies in my list. I have 1980 up to 2024 in another list. So the last one I'm gonna do tonight is Kramer versus 1979. And again, I think this was a bad pick. Kramer versus Kramer. I did not enjoy this movie. I don't know why it was so popular. I mean, for one thing, I really do not like Meryl Streep. I think she's a very, very overrated actress. I didn't like her in this movie. I think the only movie I've ever seen that I've liked her in was Defending Her Life. She was very good in that. She was okay in Mamma Mia, not even that great. And that wasn't even that great of a movie. I know. I think Meryl Streep was very overrated, and I also think Kramer versus Kramer was overrated. My favorite movie of 1979 was Hair, and Hair was based on a very, very popular 1960s Broadway musical that has some of my favorite music. It's probably my favorite musical of all time. Amazing musical. It was basically a depiction of the 60s, the whole counterculture of the 60s. And I think the movie was even better than the play. The play was mostly just an exhibition of the times. It didn't even really have that much of a story to it. The movie, they turned it into a really good story and really good. They kept all they didn't put all the music, but they put, I'd say, more than half of the songs from the original play, and they did a really good job. The music was excellent, the choreography was excellent, and the story was really good. And so that's my favorite movie of that year. And anyway, that's my first half of my list on what I think should have been the best pictures of all the movies I've seen from 1938 to the present. I did up to 1979. I'll continue this tomorrow. I guess that means I'll either have to make 2 videos tomorrow on this channel so I can catch up with my top 3,000 songs of personal songs of the rock era, but I'm gonna make the follow up to this tomorrow. You'll get to see what I think are my favorite movies since 1980. So anyway, that's my special feature for tonight, and that's also my profile on song number 2907. Everybody's Talking by Nilsson. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Bye.